Everybody, happy Monday. We are back again for Bring the Jury. My name is Hannah. This is Luke and Bryan Sheely of the Sheely Law Firm located in Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina, specializing in criminal defense, personal injury, all the things.
All the things.
All the things, from stop signs to murder and everything in between. So
stop signs out of murder?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Murdering someone who runs a stop sign?
Exactly.
Murdering someone with a stop sign.
Yeah. You guys had that? Use it as like a...
That'd be great.
That'd be crazy. Anyways, real quick before we dive into Bryan Kohberger and all of the updates that have kind of come up since we last spoke, you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you catch little bits of this episode and want to catch the full thing, this episode will be posted on YouTube, the full video version, this week. And then if you want the audio, that'll be posted to majority of all streaming services as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So,
Okay, get out.
yeah. Luke has lawyer things.
Sorry,
We'll go ahead and get started.
So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about Mr. Kohberger. He's got a pretty interesting preliminary hearing coming up. Interesting because, you know, prelims happen around the country all day long. It is basically the cop's opportunity to state to a judge why he or she has probable cause to arrest an individual. So it happens all the time. It just doesn't always happen on a case of this magnitude where we obviously have 4 different murder charges. And so last week we were covering about how the defense had an interesting maneuver where they basically executed an out-of-state subpoena on one of the living roommates. And we're basically having her come to court from a different state to testify in this preliminary hearing, which is scheduled for June 26, saying that she has exculpatory material which will help prove their client's innocence. And so that was all lined up. Her lawyer, and she had to hire an attorney to try to move to quash that subpoena. And right before all that was being litigated, they kind of agreed, well, we're going to be interviewed by the defense team. So this is all kind of very unusual in the sense that it's happening before a preliminary hearing. I mean, the defense is always trying to interview witnesses, especially living witnesses, in a house where 4 really kind of heinous stabbings occurred. That's normal, but just the subpoenaing her in was a little bit abnormal.
Was she the one that's claiming perhaps that she saw the killer, or is that the other?
This is the other one. So
Okay.
This is the one that is describing the assailant with bushy eyebrows and kind of an athletic build is not really the one that was fighting the subpoena.
Okay.
This one that is kind of, we're not quite sure really about her initial law enforcement interviews. I mean, there is a big gag order on the case. But so basically the agreement is that she's going to be interviewed by the defense team before the prelim, which is pretty amazing that that's kind of the resolution of a motion to quash, a subpoena, and that's the end result because that's all they ever want anyway. But so that was kind of last week's dealings. But now the defense has filed a motion to compel evidence in this case, and that's not so abnormal. I mean, that happens all the time. I think in different states it's way more common. In South Carolina, it's quite common because we don't have a real rigorous, systematic kind of disclosure of evidence that is done in a timely way. I mean, it's tragic. I mean, we have rules on it, but there's no teeth to it. So prosecutors kind of send the discovery, send the evidence when they get it. And so if we have a big case that we're trying to jumpstart and get our investigation going, we'll usually send a nice letter outlining what we need. This is after our initial motion for the evidence. We'll send a nice letter. If months and months and months are dragging on and we don't have the information, we'll file a motion to compel. It's not that big of a deal. So they've done it in this case, and the motion to compel is about some specific items that they obviously want before the prelim. They are looking for forensic information testing of things that are recovered at Bryan Kohberger's parents' house, trash can, other receptacles, and also testing that was done on Kohberger's Hyundai Elantra. So this is really forensic testing, and that kind of stuff. Luke, is that always quick and Johnny on the spot, or sometimes that take a bit?
No, it does take a bit. Help me with that. But yeah, I mean, you want to know what you request for the information quickly, and you also know the eyes of the world on this case are watching. So it would be a real pain if you made a meal out of some kind of scheduling issue and you had an expert that you're trying to provide with forensic information such as DNA bench notes or things like that, and then the judge wants to know why you haven't even really gotten information yet, and you want to make sure you're covering your tracks to say, well, I asked once nicely, I asked twice nicely, and yes, I did file a motion. It's nothing personal, but I want this judge to know that any delay is not on our end. So it doesn't mean that you are at war or that they're hiding something, but it is a very formal request to make sure that everybody knows that you need this information to do your job.
Yeah, and if they're specifically requesting that kind of forensic testing done, number one, it could very likely be not ready and available yet. I mean, your average DNA testing, forensic testing is always the last thing that comes coming from the prosecution, because it does honestly take a longer bit of time. Now, high-profile cases can get fast-tracked. I mean, all a prosecutor has to do is really dial up and kind of jump the queue for their local testing agency, whether it's the local law enforcement agency or whether it's going to be like a statewide agency. Like here in South Carolina, we have SLED. Everyone knows about SLED from the Murdaugh case. But so they're looking for forensic evidence results. They're saying that potentially could have exculpatory information. And this prelim, the way they do it in Idaho, it appears that they're going to be calling witnesses. Potentially, they're looking for ways to discredit the case. And if I'm almost positive. Actually, I'm not almost. I'm 100% positive that the defense team has hired a DNA expert, because the DNA link is one of the strongest pieces of evidence in this case so far, and they're going to want to know how to combat that. And so they're getting advice and instruction from a DNA expert, and that's why they're kind of like hammering in on what they're missing in terms of the forensic testing, because they want to get it to their DNA expert, and then be ready to cross-examine a lead investigator at the prelim. So looking for all those lab reports, notes. They don't have body camera footage from Kohberger's initial arrest.
Was it not recording, or was there an issue with it?
No, it's just they just don't have it. And so it's not that they're saying it doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
They just don't have it from his initial arrest in Pennsylvania. And, that could be due to the fact that it's a different agency out in Pennsylvania, but body cam is pretty easily made available. So motion to compel pending. A lot of people are kind of freaking out about that, and oh my gosh, it's a terrible thing, and how awful is that for the defense to file? It's just practice of law, people. It is just the practice of law. Now, if you file a motion to compel the first week after arrest, yeah, that's not a good practice. But we're now into 6-7 months of this case. I think it's appropriate this time, and it's just one of those things that I probably filed 500 to 1,000 motion to compels in my 16-year career so far, and I probably will file another 2,000, 3,000 as I continue on. So it's just one of those things that sometimes that's what it takes to light a fire.
So also with this case, there's been a lot of discussion about the death penalty in Idaho and what that could look like. Mention of, whether it be firing squad or all these other different forms of death penalty. There was news was it this week, about death penalty prosecutors that.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it's, we got this gag order, but so it's really the news is on this case is very much coming through 4 or 5 different filters. It's the stuff that comes out is very slow, and then it's any little bit of news is big news. But basically, the county prosecuting attorney Bill Thompson has brought in 2 kind of prosecutors. Brought in Jeff Nye, who is the chief of the state criminal law division.
I wonder if he's related to Bill.
Bill Nye. Oh, that'd be fascinating. Probably not.
Probably not.
It's not good when they bring in the death penalty prosecutors.
So they brought in, these are both from the Idaho Attorney General's office. They brought in, Jeff Nye, who's kind of the head of their criminal law division. They've also brought in a lady named Ingrid Beatty, who's the state's lead deputy attorney general for special prosecution, to assist Bill Thompson's office. What I have starred here, and I find to be, so that they're loaded for bear. They're bringing in these prosecutors to help shape the prosecution. They're receiving evidence. They're looking at it. They're trying to figure out what kind of case do we have here. These death penalty prosecutions are sensitive. You don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to jump the gun and fall flat on your face. You don't want to have a death penalty case if it's full of legal issues. And we're going to talk about some legal issues that may be baked into the case with one of the officers. But so they're getting ready as they can be. Luke, I mean, from day one, the defense team would be thinking about this in terms of a death penalty case, right?
Absolutely. I mean, whoever is representing, we know the lawyers are preparing for the worst, hoping for the best, but also trying to maybe find reasons to convince the prosecution not to seek death. So in a death case, you need mitigation. You need any reason to spare a life. So they're looking for all of that, but also knowing that probably the politics surrounding it are going to probably cause it to be noticed for death. And it's just a whole different ballgame because you have such a extensive jury selection process compared to a normal homicide murder case, and it's bifurcated. You got 2 different trials. You have a guilt phase to decide, just like a normal case, is someone innocent beyond a reasonable doubt of the crime alleged? Are they not? And if they're found guilty, then you have a whole separate trial just to decide the punishment, whether it's life or death. And so it's a whole trial then. And so it just takes way more work, way more skill involved. And so obviously they're bringing in folks probably on both sides that have that kind of experience. And it also ups the ante for appellate issues, cost, obviously involved on both sides. So it definitely requires a lot more skill and training.
So one of the special prosecutors, Ingrid Beatty, and actually, according to her LinkedIn, attended the same university where all 4 victims were killed. And she, in Nye, has been an adjunct professor there at the same university since 2021. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Is that conflict of interest at all?
I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, also, I guess a very large university, so they may not, have any connection, but that would also be...
It's a large university. I'm sure the prosecutors will say, it's a big campus. It's,
right.
Anyone that's everyone in the area could potentially teach there or could have attended. So I don't think it's on its face a conflict of interest. I mean, we had a murder case here over a decade ago where one of the, it was a close call where there was a prosecutor that was very much in the vicinity of a murder. I mean, she basically lived up the street from a murder.
I need your phone.
Sorry,
I'm in the middle of something that
my phone is...
Oh, shit. I tried to avoid. I need a text from it.
Oh, is it like a code?
Yeah.
It texted a code.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Bryan, why don't you tell us some fun facts about being a twin?
I don't know.
being a twin.
Are you invested in the twin shenanigans or the Kohberger case? Also, we have a question.
Yeah, now's a good time for.
How they will begin to defend Kohberger with all of the evidence they currently have. What do you have to say?
Comes in. I mean, it would seem that they potentially could have a lot of evidence. But we'll see. I mean, if we've got a couple things we're going to talk about in terms of some new unsealed search warrants there's rumors of more evidence coming in, but I mean, right now they've got the DNA, they've got a vehicle description, they've got video surveillance of a vehicle matching a description that Kohberger drives. They've got the kind of lack of evidence sometimes is the evidence.
We're still going. It's all good.
Do we have to take it off the phone to do this?
In the work hours, so things are happening.
Things are happening.
Might have a client come in any second.
That'd be awesome.
You never know.
All right. So what were we talking about before that? We were talking about.
Well, Mr. Walker had a question about.
There's a lot of evidence for Alec.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I'll just say this again. The prelim is going to be fascinating. It's probably going to be a very lengthy proceeding. It's going to be fascinating. It'll totally kind of unveil defense strategy. It'll probably help us cue in more on how the prosecutors are going to be looking at this case. I mean, clearly it seems like they're going to be trying to establish that he was a stalker type figure. We're going to get to this in a little bit here, but there's more information kind of coming out of the filtering process of this gag order that maybe indicates he did know one of the victims and maybe was jilted. We'll talk all about that in a little bit here, but back to the big hotshot death penalty prosecutors. The big guns are coming in and they're pissed because the victims are at the school where they teach and went and attended. So
that is very odd. But
yeah, it does ring a little odd.
Speaking of, did you hear? I don't know if this is new. If you heard about this, but Kohberger was a security guard at his high school. I believe that he graduated from for 5 years, 2 years prior to now. And they had, good things to say that he was reserved and everything, but reliable. But it's just, I find it so interesting that this guy was so fascinated with security, criminology, all of those things. I mean,
and this guy is getting a full psychological workup done on him right now by the defense team. And it may never be known if it's bad. If it's mitigating in some kind of way, it'll come out potentially at trial, but he's being assessed up and down. Probably,
he's got the eyes.
He does have interesting eyes.
He's got the eyes. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding.
So, talking a little bit more about this gag order, this filtering process that we're under right now. I mean, we are completely under a gag order, so everything is in fits and bursts of information. One thing interesting about the gag order is that it's been appealed and it's come up before. And the interesting thing about it is that it was appealed up to the Supreme Court in Idaho. So the judge that set a very broad gag order. And so the media has appealed it, but also one of the victims' families has appealed it. The Gonclaves family are part of the appeal process. And so this is a victim's family that wants the gag order lifted. And of course, local media, national media wants it lifted. And, it just strikes me as something to talk about because a victim's family wants information. Now, the victims are getting information, presumably under the Victims' Rights Act of the state of Idaho, from the prosecutor's office. but maybe they're not getting as much information as they want because there's a fear of, information kind of coming out and being leaked. Or, every state has their own version of a Victims' Rights Act to be kept informed. And so I'm just thinking about reasons why a victim's family would be kind of jumping in to appeal this gag order, and it could be because they're just not getting enough information from prosecutors, and prosecutors are sitting there with their hands kind of held up and like, we can't tell you things, which would seem to be flying in the face of a Victims' Rights Act. The other thing that's interesting about it is on most big cases, the defense team is very comfortable having a true gag order in place because it helps limit the exposure of information to a potential jury pool. The higher the profile of the case, the bigger the exposure,
right.
The more people hear about information and kind of get their minds made up. This is a very popular topic for the podcast, and we kind of look at things that we want to talk about based on popularity and what are people wanting us to look at. And so this is coming out repeatedly as a case of interest. And so I guarantee you the defense is not interested in a gag order being lifted because they want to keep this as insulated as possible so as not to taint potential jury panel. You got to find a jury at some point that is not knowing a whole lot about, facts or anything like that. How are we doing, Luke?
I still need to text.
Okay.
I really apologize.
No, don't apologize. Sorry.
It's annoying the crap out of me. I'm engaged in something right now.
Needs my phone.
And it doesn't allow me to engage our viewers. Because I'm the more entertaining twin anyway. So I lose that weekly affirmation.
That should be a poll. Who do you think is the more engaging twin? I say we. Luke and Bryan are not the lawyers assigned to the case. Again, we are in South Carolina.
Oh, is that a question?
Well, it's why are we talking about it if there's a gag order?
Well, because the gag order is for the state of Idaho, and so we get to talk about it all we want because we're not in the state of Idaho. But that being said, the gag order has
This is not our first live. Someone's like, tell me it's your first live without telling me it's your first live. That is very funny, Aaron. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. This is not our first live, but we definitely do have a lot to
So the gag order was just deemed by the Supreme Court in Idaho as being unconstitutional. Vague, overly broad, unduly restrictive.
One more time. Come on, I'm not shitting you. This is so annoying.
Okay, this will be, I think, the last time we have to pause it.
But will it?
But will it?
So,
proceed.
The gag order has been deemed by the Supreme Court to be too restrictive and unconstitutional, and they basically have issued an order telling the lower court, get your stuff together, we're going to let you do the right thing on it. And so that lower court, this magistrate judge has decided to hold a hearing on it to essentially correct things. So it seems like we could be getting a whole lot more information on this case because the gag order is going to be no more. So speaking of interesting things, because right now we're dealing with lots of restricted information on this case, there's information coming and is being reported that based on a new unsealed search warrant, probably having to do with disclosures coming before the June 26th preliminary hearing, that there's interesting things coming out of the search warrant. The biggest thing of note for me, I think a lot of people, is that one of the victim's IDs, driver's license IDs, may have been located in Bryan Kohberger's glove box of his vehicle.
This is so interesting to me. So, and maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead because we're going to talk about incel later. But my dad is a criminal defense attorney in North Carolina, and he worked a case one time where he was representing a police officer who became obsessed with this woman who pretty much kept turning him down. And we're gonna circle back to why this applies to Bryan Kohberger later. but it's this idea of this incel, which is involuntarily celibate. And I guess that's very specific, but it really is like broadly just maybe a heterosexual man that kind of blames women for his lack of success romantically. Anyways, this fits so in line with this case that my dad worked, and one of the big pieces of evidence, that was kind of the nail in the coffin, was they found the woman that he killed, who he was trying to pursue, and she kept rejecting him. He killed her as a result, and they found her ID in his possession. So, just kind of crazy.
So I think Walker, who was listening, was like, "How are they going to defend this guy?"
Yeah.
I mean, they got nothing yet.
Nothing yet
compared to what could be coming. So, I mean, again, this is kind of in the light of this gag order, but it seems to be fairly specific. So it's clearly somebody that has access to the unsealed search warrant is looking at a victim's ID, maybe found in Kohberger's glove box. So that would be huge, right? I mean, that would be like attacking DNA, attacking, from a defense perspective, why he may have turned his cell phone off so you can't do the geolocation tracking and also the cell phone tower tracking. That's one thing, but to find a victim's ID in a glove box after killing would be significant.
It'd be the Snapchat video of this case.
It would be the Snapchat video of the kennels from the Murdoch case in this case. But again, that is not substantiated yet. It's just being reported, coming through the gag order filter. And that would just be crazy. So, but it does kind of lead us into a lot of people. If that is true, and this prosecution becomes more of a stranger home invasion killing to a stalking incel complex, unrequited affection, need uncontrollable rage, need to deal with my rejection, and just that kind of thing.
Victim blaming.
So, Hannah, do you want to talk more? I mean, I think you covered a little bit about the incel complex and what you've learned about it and what it means.
Yeah. So, incel complex, again, to reiterate, is involuntarily celibate. Typically referring to a heterosexual male and his view of society, kind of blaming society and women specifically for his lack of success in, that romantic realm. And I feel like you see this a lot portrayed, like in Hollywood. I mean, I think it's a fairly common thing. Maybe this toxic masculinity of refusing to kind of take ownership for perhaps your own like shortcomings, or that you have to be successful with women to have any sort of like identity. I mean, we could go deep into that, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they're framing this as, or I think what they've just nodded towards with Kohberger. It's funny because we were watching a video, police cam, of him, talking. He got pulled over, because he was like in an intersection or something, doing something illegal in Washington, which has crazy traffic laws anyways. So, but he, he just came off very, awkward, like socially, just like something's just different. The way that he was talking to a police officer was just not normal.
Yeah, I mean, what Hannah's referring to is some body cam footage has been released of a traffic stop that Kohberger had, an interaction with a female law enforcement officer that basically pulled him over for running a red light. And we watched this video. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And, I, as a practicing criminal defense lawyer, and I kind of feel like my interactions with law enforcement professionally, I have no fear. But, even when I get pulled over by a cop for speeding, I'm a little nervous, you kind of just can't help it, right? Right. So, like, in court, I have no fear. But if I get, I don't want to get a speeding ticket, I'm yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, officer, how can I'm trying to do everything right.
Yeah, he's pretty combative in this video.
Kohberger is immediately challenging this woman
out of state, the state that I don't think he's familiar with the law.
And she's very respectful. She comes up and says, "Just so you know, you're being audio and video recorded. You know why I stopped you." And he's instantly challenging her and saying, "Well, I wasn't. Where I'm from, our traffic laws are different, and you can kind of see my point of view." And and she's just like, "Well, you broke the law, and so we can't do that here." And then he's even saying, "Well, we don't even have crosswalks in Pennsylvania," because she was saying you're in the crosswalk.
He just keeps going on and on.
And he basically, it's interesting you mentioned like kind of toxicity, and if he has relationship issues or whatever. Like he is really trying to control the situation.
Correct. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. This woman can't be right.
And he's just kind of talking all about everything. With her, and ultimately he gets a warning ticket, but like he is not the meek kind of "thank you, I'm so sorry, I just wasn't paying." He's really talking about his own local traffic laws that are different. He's talking about where he's from, and he's kind of debating her assessment of the situation when she had eyes on it. So it is very interesting. This was very shortly before these killings.
I would love to, we mentioned the body cam footage that currently we just don't have, I suppose. I would be so interested to see and compare his interactions with a male officer versus this female officer that pulled him over, just in relation to this whole allegation of incel with him, particularly in his personality and kind of how that adds up. Because with that in mind, and then viewing that video kind of through that lens, it's like I can totally see that for him. Just the way that he was, kind of carrying himself, having this conversation with this woman. And then, if all of this were to kind of fall in line a week later with these killings of these women that he, perhaps was stalking or had been rejected by, or, the story can go on and on. I mean, it would be very interesting. When I was watching that video, I kept thinking he reminds me so much of Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler, if you've seen that movie. I mean, it's almost eerily similar how identical their behaviors are, and even the eyes. I mean, everything. If you've seen that movie, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But
yeah, he is no shrinking violet in that interaction with law enforcement.
Yeah, very odd.
He definitely thinks he's in control of the situation. He thinks he's smarter than that officer.
Yeah.
We ever have any clients that think they're smarter and better than everyone else?
Yeah. From time to time.
A couple other things, and we kind of had a talking point in our last episode about some of the evidence they were getting out of his apartment. We were kind of talking a little bit and having a little fun game about some things that were found at his parents' house that are very common, like knives and pistols and magazines, and things that can kind of be sensationalized and make it seem a little bit more sinister than what it really is. Things are very common in a lot of people's homes, but one thing that we were not aware of and is being reported on is that in his apartment, now this is his apartment where he was living and studying as a criminology PhD candidate. The blood that was found on his mattress was presumptive for blood, and so that is more than just a red stain. Maybe he had a nosebleed one night, or maybe he had blood all over him and he went to sleep and did, so
maybe he killed a cat in his own bed.
So you never know. But it is presumptively testing positive for blood. Now, we do know from covering the Murdaugh trial that just because you're presumptively positive for blood, like SLED tested Murdaugh's shirt, presumptively positive, and then it was officially tested and had no blood on it. So these presumptive tests aren't always accurate, but we do know, at least preliminarily, it was positive for blood. They'll do further testing. There are some more descriptors of his apartment as being bare bones, limited furniture. He didn't have a shower curtain.
Nightcrawler.
He didn't have a shower curtain, so his trash was all emptied. There was hardly anything in his desk drawers, just Spartan existence, or either he cleaned it out in anticipation of a follow-up investigation. So that is interesting to all of us. One other thing that is a talking point.
Oh, and the bedroom door was locked when the police showed up.
Ah.
His bedroom door. I mean, I think they got in, but maybe just interesting. I don't know.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he was just, didn't want any amateurs stalking through his desk drawers with nothing in them. But so it's locked. The other interesting thing that's coming out is that the DA's office has basically announced that they were disclosing, pursuant to Brady and Giglio, that there is an internal affairs investigation they're disclosing concerning one of their officers to the defense team. And so, a lot of officers will have an internal affairs file that's completely empty. Officer does a good job for 20, 30 years, and it may have some harmless complaints in it. But if the DA is actually making a public announcement that they're disclosing, pursuant to Giglio, material related to an officer in this case, that tells me that the defense team already has it. They've probably already done a Freedom of Information Act request, or they already have gotten this information, and I think the DA probably feels that they better disclose it before they get ambushed by it or taken advantage of maybe in a preliminary hearing regarding this information. So I don't know if it's going to be one of the lead case agents, or maybe just the cop that was looking at Hyundai Elantras and trying to figure out which one looked like a good one to follow up a lead on. I don't know who's going to be, but there is an internal affairs investigation file being turned over, which is, that's great. More disclosure is better. It's more accountability for a prosecutor's office. Is what you should do in all cases. There's actually a great case called Kyles v. Whitley that I think about often when I'm trying to convince a prosecutor to do their job and disclose evidence. And it says that a prudent and cautious prosecutor should always lean towards the side of disclosure as opposed to, even things that aren't written down, as opposed to just keeping their own, private musings and internal understandings of a case to themselves. So really our U.S. Supreme Court has said even things that aren't written down or, video footage or forensic data, let's say a prosecutor has a conversation with a witness that's not anywhere other than a phone call, or maybe a prosecutor and an in-house investigator go out to a scene and are talking to somebody or viewing something that contradicts something else or is exculpatory of impeachment, and it's not even written down or there's no report generated, they got to disclose it. So, we do applaud prosecutors when they disclose things like this. Clearly, there's some officer that has some internal affairs baggage that they want to get ahead of. They want to do the right thing. So I imagine we'll know a whole lot more about that at the June 26th preliminary hearing event, or if the gag order gets lifted in advance of June 26th, we're going to hear a lot about everything that is, building up in this case. But at least we have one officer with some issues.
Yeah, good for the defense, and of course the prosecution needs to try to get ahead of it so the defense doesn't make a bigger deal of it. But it's hard to say unless there's something in there, but it can be very helpful for any defense lawyer. We had a case a couple of weeks ago where I had an internal affairs file that was pretty plumpy with some good information.
Plumpy?
Yeah. And I had to cross-examine this officer, and I just said, I've got your internal affairs file, we need to talk about it. But let's just talk about how you weren't really qualified to do what you did here.
And if I recall, that file that you waved around at that officer while he was on the stand, as soon as you said that, he instantly rolled over and let you tickle his belly. Basically.
Tickled his belly. So it's very helpful to have that file for the defense.
Right.
All right. What's next on the docket?
I think that's it.
That's it? We kind of went through everything?
I mean, we're going to talk about the video, a lot. I think we've talked about kind of all the major talking points. As soon as this gag order gets lifted, we're going to have lots of information, but those are our talking points for today. And the sun's back. I got it.
Yeah, it's because we started earlier today, so now it's coming in later.
Right.
So if you guys have any last minute questions, we're going to just quickly maybe touch on some of the Murdoch news while we get questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Murdoch news.
Okay. So if you have any questions, really about anything, doesn't have to be about Idaho 4 or Bryan Kohberger, but if you have that, go ahead and ask us below. We'll answer. Or just any burning questions that you have for the Bring the Jury podcast. We're happy to answer. We won't disclose Luke's bank information that he was so intent on getting, but anything else is
did they not scroll down on this TikTok live? Did that bank information not
just screen share the bank info? No, that didn't happen. But anything else, we're open books. So while you guys are asking any last minute questions that you may have before we log off, we're just going to touch on some of the updates with the Murdoch trial. Well, not trial, sorry, but Murdoch News channel.
Yeah, I think some of the newsworthy items, and we touched upon this last week, is Murdoch has responded in some civil case pleadings concerning the Satterfield settlement that he essentially lied to an insurance investigator to kind of get more money out of that case. And so he's basically saying that he initially said that his dogs were the ones that maybe knocked Miss Satterfield, the housekeeper, and now he's saying that was a lie. So
Bubba?
Bubba the dog. So he's basically in these pleadings saying that was not the case. He lied about it.
So is he trying to shorten his sentence, or is he going to try to come up with some deal that's I'll give you the real story if you can he?
I mean
what's the angle?
I don't know what the angle is, other than he's trying to disrupt what it does is he's basically kind of admitting that he's committed insurance fraud, but I think what people are concerned about is that it somehow could undo an insurance payout that ultimately and hopefully went to the Satterfields. But what do you think his angle is, Luke, on doing that?
I don't know, but I know Satterfield lawyers are not happy about it, and I think simultaneously Mr. Murdoch's lawyers are trying to request some funds from the receivership to fund the appeal. So maybe they're concerned about money going back in the Murdoch pot or out of a Satterfield pot. It is a little strange.
Yeah, there was a hearing last week where, Jim Griffin was asking for money from the receivership fund or Murdoch's retirement fund, which has been frozen for the purpose of paying financial crimes victims. They were asking for about $160,000 and some change, so that the same defense team that did his trial can now be funded for the appellate process. And I think Jim Griffin was quoted as saying, well, Judge, if we can't get funding, then he's going to have to go to the public defender's office. That was a little insulting, because let's be clear. The appellate defenders in South Carolina, that all they do are the appeals. And most people can't afford an appellate lawyer to take up their case, but there's a whole order of appellate defenders that are the smartest and the brightest and the most experienced appellate advocates at that level, that guys that do trial work can't really translate to appellate work. The rules are different. What you plead is different. The judges that you're in front of in terms of the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court are not your trial judges. The issues have to be litigated differently. So we tell people all day long that will maybe call us up and say, hey, I hear you guys are good. Can you do my appeal? No, I don't want to do your appeal. I couldn't do it.
Well, did one.
Well, you've done one, but
7 years.
Yeah. So so I found that to be a little bit. I'm sure they want to keep your hands on the case. I get that, but the lawyers at the appellate defenders are they are the best appellate lawyers in the state of South Carolina. Now the state pays for them, so that's a whole other issue. Is that a lot of people are like, well, we have these victims that need to be paid and no more money needs to be going to defense lawyers on this case. However, it is either that way or there can be a lot of investment on the appellate defense side, and so that money's being spent either way. He's got a right to an appeal. He's got a right to appeal a denial at the appellate level and keep on going up. So, I just if they want to release some money, that's one thing, but just the thought that if the money isn't released, he'll be forced to have to go to the appellate defender's office is a little bit, that's not a bad thing. Those lawyers are great. They are really the smartest lawyers, some of the smartest lawyers in the state of South Carolina. So there's that issue. There's been some discussion about like where is he being housed? What's his living situation like? I mean, Alec Murdaugh is in protective custody. He has to be. He will always be in protective custody at the South Carolina Department of Corrections because he's the most famous guy there, and so he can't just be in a unit, on Broad River or someplace else. He's going to always be in a special statewide protective custody detail, and that means that he could be anywhere. He could be anywhere in the state. He could be anywhere in the country. I've had clients that, for instance, I had a client that saved a guard and from being killed, and by some gang members because there was a hit on the guard, and so my client intervened. And he got savagely beaten almost to his death for retaliation purposes. And so for the SCDC put him in protective custody, and he served the remainder of his sentence like mostly out of state. I mean, he would tell me stories about he would go to West Virginia in some prison and it was like they let him smoke, and things are different. I mean, and he moves around constantly. You can't really stay fixed in one unit. So where Alec Murdaugh is, I don't know, but he certainly can't be housed like a normal inmate where you're on a block and you're on a yard and you're kind of working a job and everyone you get into a routine. He just will never be like that due to his protective custody classification.
So this last thing. We do have a lot of questions, but we did have something funny just come through. The lighting on the face from the sun looks like we're telling ghost stories. So we do have a lot of questions. I'm going to just kind of fire them off. I'm not going to ask all of them because some of them we have answered either in the last episode. This is, I think, part 5, maybe part 4 or 5 that we've done on Idaho 4.
Where can they find us?
And so thank you, Bryan. You can go and listen to those episodes and get those answers to your questions. All of our episodes are posted on YouTube and major streaming platforms. If you like audio over the video, you can find us there and get those questions. But other questions that do need answers are about to be served right now. So, first question. Do you think that he acted alone? This is just kind of an opinion, but I find this to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're switching back to Kohberger.
Luke, you can weigh in too, but I think we both...
If he did it, then I think...
100% acted alone.
Yeah, this is kind of a lone wolf, plan it out, map it out, be weird, be Nightcrawler.
Yeah, they're going to watch Nightcrawler.
I need to watch Nightcrawler.
Yeah, it's very good.
Do it.
Very good.
Try not to make witnesses, so act alone.
Let's see. Why have a new detective take such a high-profile case? Payne was not the most experienced, it shows.
I mean, I think sometimes these cases come in and they just get assigned. They get on a rotation.
Whoever's up.
And
on deck.
Whoever's on deck. And until they get into a case, they don't really know. Like, this case is obviously so sensational because of who Kohberger is. This criminology PhD candidate who wanted to work in law enforcement, who was...
And a number of bodies.
Who kind of has this aura vibe about him. He's got IDs of his victims in his car. He's stalking. He's doing things. So, there are lots of, kind of mass homicides and slaying and killings of family members in homes. And so they don't know how sensational a case is going to be when it first comes off the beat. Like these major crimes investigators, whether they're kind of new to the division, they'll get a case. They're up. There was an investigator that worked two nights in a row taking cases. Now they're up, and time to earn your paycheck. And so it's just one of those things that sometimes they just don't know how big a case is going to be. So that's my best way of answering that.
Should the university wait to demolish the house? I've seen a lot of this, people discussing, because the university wants to tear down the house out of respect and, all that jazz. Do you believe that they should wait? I guess, what could the house offer that it hasn't already been?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, certainly from a defense perspective, they could hire several different experts who really have a desire to look at the crime scene, to see the layout. Is it consistent with a witness's account? Do their own collections. I mean, a lot of times we'll go back to a crime scene with an expert and find different things. If whoever watched the Murdoch trial, I mean, you note the various experts that went to the scene, and we're finding different pellets lodged to explain different angles. So
would the jury even potentially be able to?
They might want to.
House?
They might want to stand right there, just like the jury went to Moselle. So at some point, the state or the defense may want to revisit it for some particular reason, to collect some additional evidence, tear up the carpets, time something, measure something. So, yeah.
If I were hearing about the university thinking about demolishing that building, I'd be filing a preservation motion right now, a spoliation motion, to prevent anything from happening until the case is over on that particular crime scene. Because we don't have the forensic information yet. We don't have a lot of information yet. The public doesn't know a whole lot. The defense team is already filing a motion to compel, so they're seeking more information, but especially concerning the expert type information, DNA, forensic, crime scene reconstruction, things that the defense doesn't have yet. Once they get it and assess it, they could very well want to have their experts go out and test and retest. And we have 2 living victims too, so or people that are in the home. And so, like Luke says, if they're testifying or their affidavits coming out in a preliminary hearing, they could be describing the house, the surroundings, what they saw, and you may want to go back and retest, remeasure. Luke's got a funny story. Remember that crime scene up North Main Street where you and our senior investigator did some retesting, and that kind of how that turned out?
Shane's house?
Remember where Bobby's dad was running and doing the time? Yeah. Tell that story. That's great.
Well, it was a
It's an example of going back to a crime scene.
We went to a crime scene, and the victim gave a very particular account of the time and where he was when the robbers robbed him and came out. And so we were at the scene, and I think the prosecutor came with us to the scene. And all of a sudden, our crackerjack investigator at the time.
What kind of crime scene? What kind of area was this?
It was a very bad part of town.
No slight to North Main if you're watching from Columbia.
I don't think the prosecutor had realized where our investigator had gone, and we were chatting. But he was a middle-aged, older African-American male with big cowboy hats. You can't really miss him. But all of a sudden, he decided he was going to time and measure the path of flight that the would-be assailants would have had to take. How long would it take to get the street? So our investigator, we're just talking to the prosecutor on the sidewalk, and this guy comes hauling butt out of the apartment at full tilt, sprinting like Terminator.
Like 6'2" with a cowboy hat.
Right, and runs past the prosecutor, and then stops and times. And the prosecutor ducked because he didn't know what was going on. He thought that something was going down in this neighborhood. And that's Bobby. What are you talking about? But it's important to revisit the scene, really every case.
Absolutely. So it would be a major problem if the university knocked down that house and destroyed the defense and the prosecution's ability to go revisit.
And again, the prosecution team now has 2 university employees working for them?
Well, it looks like one was a professor there through 2021, and one attended there as part of their education. So they have ties to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to lump a few questions together here because we've got a lot of questions about the living roommates. So what are your thoughts on Dylan? And then I'm going to kind of circle back. Someone else then piped in and said, I think DM, so that's Dylan, and BF, the other roommate's stories could potentially clash. Kohberger's timeline seems jacked up already. So I guess wherever you guys want to jump in on that.
Well, I mean, Dylan, by all accounts, gives more of a physical description of the assailant, and then BF, who's the living witness that was being subpoenaed in. I mean, the only reason you want her under oath in a courtroom on the witness stand at this stage is to contradict and impeach either investigation or another witness. So I agree with the person that's asking the question here. I think what BF has to say is going to undermine or contradict something else that Dylan is saying. It's going to be, the defense team in filing for the subpoena and their reason for it described it as, exculpatory information and could prove his innocence. So it does seem queued up to be something of real value for the defense team. And we haven't heard anything about Dylan, so it seems like the defense team is not trying to bring Dylan in for the preliminary hearing. It seems so interested in Miss Funk, I believe that's how you pronounced her name, BF, and so they're going to take her statement. She's agreed to meet with the defense team as opposed to having to travel out of state for the prelim. So it seems it's going to be of great significance. It's going to be potentially impeaching her roommate's account. And again, there was this delivery driver as well that we have that came. We haven't heard a lot about DoorDash. Yeah, I love DoorDash. DoorDash, if you're
sponsored by DoorDash.
If you're listening, you're 1,000 times better than Bite Squad. Bite Squad is always messing that stuff up.
This is not a paid ad.
No, it's just my personal belief.
What about Uber Eats?
I have not tried that.
Oh.
I like an Uber.
Ubers are safe.
Ubers.
Don't drink and drive.
Well, depending on which
okay.
Uber you get in.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
Yeah. All right.
Famous case here in Columbia, South Carolina, surprisingly.
Yeah. That was not good.
But anyway, DoorDash, they get there fast. They don't screw up. And so anyway, we're going to have a lot of DoorDash information in this case, I imagine. DoorDash witnesses and stuff.
That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be televised? I'm assuming it's going to be just like how the Murdoch trial was.
Well, now that the Supreme Court has come down and said this big blanket gag order is unconstitutional, and then, hey, local magistrate judge, fix this, is essentially where we are. I imagine it's going to be gag order widely less restrictive, and then for any kind of court proceedings, we're going to have
full access.
Full access, yep. So Court TV is already booking, I'm sure, hotels in the area.
Wait, hold on. We've got the best listeners always, or viewers that always tune in. They are so informed. Y'all are awesome. Someone just wrote in and said the DoorDash driver is allegedly EB. I don't know the initials. Who is currently in jail for alleged murder of Caden Young. And then someone else piped in and said, yeah, the DoorDash driver is in jail.
What?
Wow.
Say what?
We need to look this up.
This defense just got interesting.
Because that would be...
And the DoorDash driver also recently got picked up for drugs.
I mean, if there's a DoorDash driver there that has a body that...
Emma Bailey, it's a woman? She.
Or
yes.
she that
yes,
has
her name is Emma. Thank you all. You guys are great.
So... we're going to look into that because I want to research that extensively. But if there is someone that has a pending murder charge and they were DoorDashing that occasion, and then Bryan Kohberger, let's say he does is obsessed about one of these girls and wants to follow up, and then, that's a third-party guilt case, and that would be quite interesting. Third-party guilt case.
This is crazy.
Maybe he walked in an open door and saw a bloody scene and touched it and left. And, oh my gosh! And I'm just a creepy guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Wow, that is fascinating information. This is a new discovery.
Let's Ozark this one.
We're gonna Ozark this. So what if? I mean, because he is this criminal. I don't know. We're gonna come back next week with a whole theory, unless you guys got one off the cuff already.
I love a good third-party guilt case.
Plot twist.
Or maybe he knew that the DoorDash person had a criminal issue.
The guy with her, she was with someone?
Man, we're going to have to research this.
Oh, we got to get hard
And she lives right behind 1122 King Road. Is that where their house is? The house that is up for demolition? Oh my gosh, y'all. This is wild. We need to bring these people on the pod. Where y'all at? Okay, this is crazy. Really appreciate you all for tuning in and all the engagement that y'all gave, and a lot of homework that we're going to do.
So now we're going to deep dive into this DoorDash person.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out her sitch, and we're going to talk some more about that and what the defense could do with that in terms of pushing it away from Kohberger and trying to blame someone else. Fascinating.
Yeah, who needs a trial when you have Bring the Jury? Exactly. We'll give you all the updates you need.
Jury.
This is another little nugget, and we're going to have to just vet all this. But, she's the DoorDash driver who's now in jail is also apparently best friends with the 6th roommate that didn't end up moving in.
Ooh.
There's there's just a lot happening.
Motive, opportunity.
Again, appreciate you guys. You all are amazing. So fun every week to tune in with you. To get more of this content, you can always follow us on our other social media platforms, or obviously TikTok, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn for the intellectuals out there and the professionals, and YouTube as well. So this full episode will be posted to YouTube this week if you missed any parts. I'll try to edit out the pauses.
Sorry, you did really well today. You didn't curse once.
Oh yeah, and
I was only in here 10 minutes.
That's great. There's a win. You probably cursed at the bank people though. Yeah, that's okay. Anyways, thank you all so much. Again, this is Bring the Jury, and if you have any more outstanding questions that we didn't answer today, go check our other episodes, or go ahead and send us a message, and we will cover it next time. I think we might have to come back to the Idaho 4 case next week as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely coming back with DoorDash.
Yeah, DoorDash. Maybe we order DoorDash while we're here.
Oh, nice.
That'd be crazy.
I'll take a